Watch Symposium. I'm Austin, and this is a custom video for Ori. He writes, Austin, longtime subscriber and huge fan of your channel. I figured I'd finally take the opportunity to write to you now and ask your opinion. 3 years ago, I caught the mechanical watch bug and have been obsessed ever since. I've owned several watches from various brands over the years, from Citizen to Rolex. I recently left the Army and have been consolidating my watch collection. My goal is to refine my collection to 3 luxury watches. After a few years collecting watches, I've discovered several things about my tastes. That's left me to purge several pieces to the few that I desire to attach my memories to and hopefully pass on to the next generation. And before we get to his current 4-piece collection, let's look at some of the pieces that he's had and since sold. He's been, again, collecting watches for 3 years, well, at least mechanical watches, and he's gone through quite a few watches since then. But as he said, it's given him experience with other brands and different functions on watches, and we can see that he's had Seiko, Hamilton. He's had quite a few Tudor watches, including a Black Bay GMT, a beautiful white-dialed Seiko Alpinist. He's had Omega. He's had a Rolex Explorer that's now gone. This is a 39 millimeter Explorer, Mark II dial. He's had a Steinhardt, a Squale, Glycine. And looking at these watches, it's pretty clear to me that Ori and I have very similar aesthetic tastes in watches. He likes, and I like, steel watches, tool watches, adventure watches. And while I wouldn't advocate buying all of these watches, they're all attractive. And so I think we have very similar tastes. Now, as far as the watches he has in his current collection, let's take a look. It's a 4-piece collection, 2 mid-tier watches and 2 high-end watches, a couple of Rolexes. My current collection includes, number 1, a Citizen Eco Drive chronograph, which I consider my first non-digital wristwatch. This piece spent considerable time overseas during my first and second deployments. It's also the watch I spent while dating my then girlfriend. Number 2, a Seiko SRP 777 Turtle. This was one of my first mechanical watches after briefly owning the Seiko SKX. I've beaten the heck out of this thing, jumping out of airplanes, shooting, etc., and it also accompanied me on my 3rd overseas tour. Number 3, Rolex Submariner 114060, no date. This was the culmination of a 7-year run in the Army. Therefore, I had it engraved. I sold several pieces in my former collection to purchase this watch. I wore it when I got married earlier last spring and on my recent honeymoon. This watch is my centerpiece and will never leave. And number 4, Rolex Explorer Perpetual 34 millimeter 114200. My first Rolex was an Explorer. Okay, that 39 millimeter Explorer that we saw in his previous collection. My supposed Grail watch. However, due to the uncomfortable and, in my opinion, disproportionate 39 millimeter size, I sold it. I had always wanted an under-the-radar 3-hander like the Explorer. However, 36 millimeter Explorer prices are stupid right now. I found that the 34 millimeter OP fits perfectly on my 6.75 inch wrist, wearing more like a classic 36 millimeter watch. Whether on leather or the bracelet, this watch is perfect for casual and formal attire. And looking at his 4-piece collection, let me first say that size-wise, I think it's just about perfect. It's not too few pieces. It's not too many pieces. When you're talking about a watch collection, oftentimes less is more. But you got to keep things interesting, and he has enough pieces for that. You need enough pieces to be able to rotate between, and it's a very down-to-earth collection. I mean, there's nothing pretentious in this collection, and all the pieces are very usable. You've got 2 mid-tier pieces, and some people might say you got to get rid of those mid-tier pieces. But look, you can't wear Rolexes all the time, so it's good to have a beater, and I think he's got a beater in the Seiko. And those watches have been with him for a long time, including through some experiences in the Army. So now in the Citizen Eco Drive, he's got a chronograph, all right? And, a fully mechanical chronograph would probably be more to my taste. But again, he dated what I'm assuming was his girlfriend at the time, but is now his wife. And again, it's been with him on 2 tours. And so there's some memories there. So this also marks the watch that took him from digital towards mechanical, and so it's it's an analog watch, and so I can see why he might be attached to it. And it's pretty function rich. It's got a date, chronograph, and again, so this would be his chronograph with the Seiko. That's a dive watch, pretty function rich, date, day, rotating bezel. He's got 2 dive watches with the sub and the Seiko, and again the Seiko that would probably be the beater of his collection when he needs a watch, but he doesn't want to risk something happening to one of his Rolex watches. And then the Rolexes. Let's talk about the sub, and that's a 40 millimeter no date ceramic sub, recently discontinued, the Fat Boy, as you might call the case. Anyway, it's got the maxi case with those big lugs, and he has it engraved. Now let's talk for a minute about engraving, because when I first got into watches, the idea of engraving a Rolex would have seemed like sacrilege to me, like you're defacing the watch. But I've come around, and I think there are good reasons to want to engrave a watch. And I think there are reasons why you might not want to. Obviously, if you're not sure about keeping the watch, if you think you might flip it in the future, you're not going to want to engrave it. It's quite a commitment to engrave a watch. But also, I think you need or should have a good occasion, a good reason, all right? Just putting your name on a watch, I don't know if that's a good reason. And I think that would devalue a watch. But when it marks something important, that's different. And this marks 7 years of Ori being in the military, being a soldier. And it's got those dates, and it's got the rank he attained. And it will be very important to his kids to have that. They'll be able to turn it over, see their father's name, see his rank, see the time he spent in the military, and they'll know that his father married their mother in that watch. It's going to be a very special timepiece to them, and the biggest problem is going to be who gets it, right, between the kids. So now, why would you not want to? Well, I can't help but think of Archie, and look, am I going to bring up his engraved reverso? No, I've already talked about it in his collection review videos. Links in the description to those. He wasn't too happy about that. He made a response video, called me aggressive, was it? Hostile. That's it. I'll put a link to that too. We'll leave his reverso alone, but I can't help but think about his recently acquired 126610 ceramic date sub, and him thinking about engraving it. And I could almost see what was going on in that head of his. He knows he's a flipper, all right? And he had it. He's happy. He wants to be a one-watch guy. He wants to be horologically monogamous, but he knows he is not. And my guess is he was looking to the future at a future flipper Archie who wants to flip that sub, and the idea of an engraving was throwing a monkey wrench in that future Archie's plan. It's like the present Archie was trying to piss on his watch to handicap his future self, all right? Now, that's some armchair psychology there. Let me know what you think. But I think sometimes people might do that. They might say, I really want to like this watch. I want this to be my one and only watch. I want it to. All right, well, you might want it to then and there. But are you engraving it to marry yourself to the watch? Forcing yourself to have the watch. That could be a problem in the future if you fall out of love with it. And so think hard about that. Now, it's kind of interesting because Ori has flipped a lot of watches. And so I wonder if a certain percentage of him was like, I'm going to make sure I don't flip that watch. But anyway, at the end of the day, it's a beautiful engraving. And I think, I love pre-owned pieces because of the interesting story, the mystery that comes with them, that whole previous life that they lived. And so if I were to come across Ori's watch and saw, Captain Ori and the dates, to me it would make it more interesting. It's not just some random name. I don't want some random guy's name on it, but having that, it almost, you can almost feel the story, tell the story, and it's very fitting a sub and the connection between the military. And so I think it was a good thing that he did that. Now, talking about the Oyster Perpetual 34mm watch, that's a great under-the-radar watch. And yes, the 36mm Explorers are quite expensive. I remember when they used to go for $4,000, looking at them, thinking, should I buy one of these? They're going up, probably. And, at the end of the day, I like more functions on a watch, so I didn't. But at the time, I knew it would go up, and sure enough, it has. And they're going for quite a bit more than $4,000, the 36mm Explorer. And I agree that the 39mm is a little too big, in my opinion. I've come around to it a bit, but if I had to choose, I'd go with the 36 over the 39. Now, there was a period with the Mark I dial of the 39 where the minute hand was shorter, and it was too short, some would say. I certainly would say that. I think they were using the old minute hand. They were using up their Explorer 36mm stock, I think, and had the white gold 369s, which I don't think look as good as the ones with lume. Again, some people think that might be a collectible watch in the future, but I view it as a mistake. And so I like the 39mm Explorer contemporary version much more, the one that he sold. But I tend to agree with Ori that I think the 36, if you had to choose, I prefer the 36. I think that's the icon. Well, I don't know if I could say that, but it's what I like. And a 36mm watch is, it's a man's watch. Sure, a woman could wear it. A 34mm watch, just gonna get ahead of those comments right there, it's not a woman's watch. It's a unisex watch. Okay, a 34mm watch is a unisex watch. I'm just stating facts here, guys, all right? So I think that works. Like he said, it works as a dress watch. You could use it as a dress watch. So, he's got his chronograph with the Citizen. He's got a couple of dive watches. And he's got the dress watch of sorts with the 34mm Oyster Perpetual. What is he missing? All right. Well, before we get to that, let me just read the rest of his email. My question is this: what third watch should I acquire to complete my 3-piece luxury collection? I'm saving up at the moment, but would like to acquire it by the end of 2021. As you can see, I've flipped several watches in a short amount of time and want to make the right decision, especially since I think this is going to be your exit piece. At least that's the way you're viewing it. I prefer low profile, thin, and classic sized watches. I'd love something more complicated, as both of my Rolex pieces are 3-handers. Yes, we're going to get to that. I love Omega, but have been turned off by their overly flashy and thick releases. I've owned several Tudors, but I have issues with many of their designs. Any help would be greatly appreciated. All right, well, I'm more of a Rolex guy, so I'm not sure if you're going to get many Omega recommendations. The Railmaster, perhaps, but I don't know if I think that's a time-only watch. Yeah, that's sort of their answer to the Explorer. Okay, forget that. You need a date. Priority number one, you need a date on your watch. And by the way, if you're buying your first Rolex, I would advocate getting one with a date. Okay, now if you want to get more Rolexes, get one without a date, because that's a great excuse to get that second Rolex. That's what I did, 14060. No date sub. Oh, I need one with a date. Got to go with the Explorer too. The wife bought that excuse, worked a treat. All right, but if you're looking for that true one and done, I would go with a date watch, all right? Because I use the date a lot of us do. And you'll be in situations where you need it, you won't have it, and it sucks, all right? So if you're going for that one and done date, now you don't have a date Rolex, so you definitely need that. And as you stated, you need more complications. So I'm thinking a date and perhaps a fourth hand. You don't have a GMT in your collection. Okay, we'll get to that. Before we get to that, let me just sort of throw out an idea, because I was thinking maybe he doesn't have date Rolexes because he doesn't like the Cyclops. And if that's the case, well, he could go with a 16600. That's a pre-ceramic 40mm Sea Dweller, or the version after that, the transitional 116600. That's a 40 millimeter ceramic Sea Dweller 4000, as it's called. Could be a very collectible piece in the future. And that was the Sea Dweller prior to it gaining 3 millimeters, which I think now it's too big. So both of those have the date, no Cyclops, but they look a lot like your sub. So I really wouldn't advocate getting one of those. I would go for something with a little bit of a different aesthetic. And I'm thinking, obviously a GMT watch, date, different aesthetic, Explorer 2. Now you could go with a 42 millimeter Explorer 2 or the 40. Given your size of wrist and the fact that you like your 34 millimeter Oyster Perpetual, I would say a 40 millimeter Explorer 2, white dial, polar. Give you a white dial, give you 4 hands, that GMT function. You'd have the date. That's the 16570. Now, which 16570 should you go for? That's another video, okay? Because first you need to decide what you want to go for, right? And then do you decide, okay, do you want a Swiss only dial? Do you want a later 3186 movement, or the earlier 3185? Do you want the Rehaught engraved? Do you want a blue parachrome spring in it? Do you want tritium on the die? Those are all things that you need to think about after you decide on the model. So the good thing about an Explorer 2 is, again, the price. They're not so crazy right now. And again, I'm talking about the 40 millimeter Explorer 2. The 42 millimeter Explorer 2, that's an option. More contemporary, more modern movement. Honestly, is 42 millimeters, I think it's going to be too big for you. I think you're more of a 40 millimeter guy size-wise. As far as the cost goes, it's going to be less. And the cost is one of the reasons I'm talking about that as opposed to a GMT Master 2, all right? Because if you think 36 millimeter Explorer prices are high, well, GMT Master 2 prices are crazy. Even the pre-ceramic, but especially the ceramic. Getting one retail at an AD is probably impossible, all right? And so you'd have to go gray market. That's crazy. I mean, if you're wincing at Explorer 36 millimeter prices, BLROs, BLNRs, not an option. But what if they were? I still wouldn't recommend you get one because you like under the radar watches, more tool watch watches, things that aren't fancy. What do you put here? You said overly flashy. Well, we're talking shiny Jubilee bracelets on the modern GMT Master 2s. And even if you're talking about, a cheaper and more affordable 116710 LN, is going to have those polished middle links. I bet you're not a polished middle link guy, right? That's why I'm not even talking about the Yachtmaster, right? It's a beautiful watch. It would give you another aesthetic, right? But again, it's too fancy. Now, I could talk about the pre-ceramic GMTs, and look, if money wasn't an object, that's the way I would go, because you would get the rotating bezel. It's basically like the Explorer 2, but you get the rotating bezel. More functionality, more fun. It's a more iconic watch. It's a black dial. You already have a black dial in your in your OP and your sub, but the inserts are fun. You change out the inserts, you get 6 different looks: Jubilee bracelet, the Oyster bracelet, the Coke, the Pepsi, the all black. But again, it's the cost. And if you want to go that route and splash out for that, this is your exit piece. I would say you might want to. All right. Again, which configuration would you want? Would you want, one with solid end links? Well, maybe I should talk about that. Yeah, maybe I shouldn't talk about that. Okay, because there's a bunch of rabbit holes we can go down, whether you want tritium, Swiss. Anyway, like I said, you should decide on the model first and then decide which configuration of that model you want to go for. All right. So there you go. That is my recommendation for you. All right. A highly functional GMT Rolex. You'll have the date, you'll have that 4th hand, and you need a GMT, some would say. All right. And I think pre-ceramic is going to be affordable. I think Explorer 2 Polar is going to give you the different aesthetic. It's going to be affordable. Again, affordable. If you really want to splash out, GMT or GMT Master 2, which is better? Well, which is better? They're both great, but I would say the GMT Master 2 is going to give you more options because you're looking to retire, right? You're looking to get out of the watch game. And so a couple years down the road, you can make things interesting with the GMT Master 2 by getting a different bezel insert, right? If you get a Pepsi, well, get a Coke insert at RSC. You can always get a Jubilee bracelet, or if you get one on a Jubilee bracelet, you could always get an Oyster. So there are a lot of different things you can do. In fact, you could even get crazy and like get an aftermarket blueberry insert. Oh, what did I just say? All right, but look, you're going to be getting out of the watch game, so you're going to have to keep things interesting. And the best watch for that is the GMT Master 2. But again, the cost, that's the issue right there. And so the more budget option would be the Explorer 2. So there you go. Explorer 2 or GMT Master 2 pre-ceramic. Which would I see? I don't know what kind of money you're looking to spend, but look, this is your last piece. This is your last piece. Just forget about price. Forget about it. Okay? Just say, which would you rather have? If there were two sitting there, a Polar Explorer 2 and a GMT Master 2, which would you want? Okay? If you say, well, I like the Explorer 2, well, go get the Explorer 2. That's great. But if you say, honestly, I would like the GMT Master 2, then that means that money is controlling your options. And you can't have that because this is your last purchase. You got to get it right, okay? And what that translates to is you just have to save longer, all right? So those are my two suggestions. Pre-ceramic 16570 Polar. You could always go with a black dial, but I would go with a Polar, different aesthetic. Or the GMT Master 2 16710. Ori, thanks for your question. Guys, drop a comment in the comment section. Let Ori know what he should do. Am I missing some good ideas? I say the Explorer 2 or the GMT Master 2. Just which one do you like more, Ori? That's the one you should go for. And if it's more expensive, just save up. Okay, again, this is your exit piece. You got to get it right. And if it means, saving up a little bit longer, I think you're better off doing that. But the viewers, I'm sure, will have great suggestions as well. Thanks for watching. Take care, and I'll see you next time.